Welcome back to Comic Book History, episode number 84. Here, now, last episode discussed something maybe some people were not really interested in hearing about. Basically, was the whole thing of like, what was and not collected from the period of 1988 to 2004. Because that time period has got a lot of comics not collected, but we're not talking about that this time. Nope. We're talking about something a lot more interesting. Everyone knows about the Avengers and the Justice League. Yep. Excuse me. Did you know there are comic creators who have worked on both series? And you're thinking, who could that be? Well, I could tell you for obvious fact, the guy who created the Justice League, Gardner Fox, has never worked on Marvel Comics. So he's completely out of the question. But what about the guy who created the Avengers? Stan Lee. Has he worked in Justice League? Yes, he has. One shot. Just imagine Stan Lee created the Justice League. That's it. That's the only thing kind of basically he's done. Okay. How about the guy who succeeded him? Roy Thomas. Yes, he has. He worked on some issues of the 200s in the 80s. So, there's another one for you. Now, the next one seems not that surprising. Now, I'm going to couple these two together because these two worked on Justice League book, Justice League America, about the same period of time. As a matter of fact, one of these guys filled in for him for about a year because the other guy wrote almost the entire freaking run. Actually, about 50% of it. The guy who wrote most of the run was Jerry Conway. Yep, Jerry Conway. A guy known in Marvel for creating The Punisher, Wear It by Night. I believe he created Tigra, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, I think it was Tigra. And I believe he also created Man-Thing. At DC, it's like a whole lot of characters. Things like the Secret Service Civilians, Killer Croc, Jason Todd, before he became Red Hood. Like, if you look up how much characters... Oh, he also can fix them, by the way. And Firestorm. If you look up how many characters here for DC, it's like... I've heard of a lot of these characters. Because Arrow practically cleaned out half the freaking cabinet of these characters when they appeared on TV. Yep. Now you're probably thinking... Now, people know about his Justice League run. But your Avengers 2? Yeah, he did. He did issues 151 to 167. Yep, yeah, very brief run in the book, but yeah. It's strange the fact that you have Jerry Conway wrote 50% of that run. Yeah, you ever have a writer who wrote, like, for a 262 book, and you have a writer like Jerry Conway who writes most of it? Yep. The guy who filled in for him when he wasn't writing the book was Steve Eichelhart. And this is the guy who was the third writer on the Avengers. He took over from Roy Thomas, who had a pretty lengthy run, about 2 or 3 years. And, of course, also, he did have a year-long run on Justice League. Just like America, this is the run where every issue was giant size. And this lasted for, like, 2 years. And this guy was basically the guy who came between Jerry Conway's first and second run for the book. Yep. You're thinking, okay, who else? Chris Claremont. You're thinking, what, the guy who wrote the X-Men? He did both? Yes, he did. He did one issue Avengers. As a matter of fact, he wrote the last issue. He co-wrote the last issue with Roy Thomas, which featured the frickin' Sentinels. And he had a very brief run with another writer in this list, I'll talk about in just a minute, who was a collaborator for him on the X-Men. Yeah, and that backed up how it would lead to a book written by the same guy. That same guy being John Byrne. Yes, John Byrne has done both. Because John Byrne has done not only Avengers Fantastic Four, he's done Wonder Woman, the X-Men, Fantastic Four, Alpha Flight. The guy has done a lot for the comic industry, and I do mean a lot. And you're thinking, okay, So, since he wrote Justice League, he wrote JLA. As a matter of fact, I'm going to talk about his very brief run in a future video. But you think, okay, what issues did he do for Justice League? Well, for Avengers mostly. Well, he did issues 164 to 166, 181 to 191, 233, 305, 307 on annuals 13 and 14. Plus, he had a lengthy run of Avengers West Coast. So, yes, he has done both. And his brief run on JLA was a backdoor pilot to Doom Patrol. Yep. Another guy who worked on both was George Perez. Now, this for some people is not surprising given the fact this guy created the Taskmaster during his run for the Justice League. But you're thinking, for the Avengers. But you're thinking he wrote Justice League as well? Yes, he did. As a matter of fact, for his Justice League America books, he actually did the artwork for issues 184 to 186, 192 to 197, and 200. And he also worked on JSA. Yep. Of course, when people think of George Perez's time at DC, people think of Wonder Woman, the new Teen Titans. Actually, John, we're working on Superman. My mistake. My correction about that. But mostly put George Perez's Teen Titans, Wonder Woman, and Crisis on Infinite Earths. Those are the three big books people think of when people think of George Perez, because he had very lengthy runs on all three titles. But yeah, he did have a run on Justice League. Okay, who's next? Damon DeMatteis. Now you're thinking, wait, as in the guy who did JLI? Kraven's Last Hunt? Yep. Yeah. He did work on the issue Avengers. He did 2 issue Avengers, issues 209 to 219. He still does work this very day. As a matter of fact, his most recent work was actually last year. Actually, his most recent book was actually Lost Hunt. Yeah, Spider-Man Lost Hunt. He did that in Ben Reilly's Spider-Man book. But yeah, those most recent books he did for Marvel. DC, he hasn't done much of anything for them in quite a while. If you're going to ask me personally, like, what was the last book he did for DC? Excuse me, I'd say it's probably like Fleece. Yeah. Actually, no, it was Blue Beetle. Yep. He worked on Blue Beetle. Yep. Okay. We're talking about John Byrne. Another guy. Those of you who have not familiar with this guy, this is Joey Cavarelli. Joey Cabarelli was also an editor. He worked on Firestorm with Jerry Conway. Apparently, he's also the creator of Hellborn's Young Huntress. Yep. And you're thinking, wait, he worked on both? Yes, he did. He worked on 3 issues Just Like America, issues 225 to 27. And for Avengers, he worked on 2 issues of that book, issues 376 and 377. So, yes. Oh, yeah, he also worked Just Like Quarterly. So, may not be very much, but yes, he has worked on some of that. James Robinson. Okay, this guy has worked on both. Now, people do know about his Just Like America book. As a matter of fact, I've talked about it. Great run, by the way. I love it. He did work on Avengers. The last 2 issues of Avengers Volume 2. He did 12 and 13. He also did pretty much the final issues for Iron Man, Captain America, Fantastic Four, as part of the part of this crossover with Wildstorm, which Marvel cannot legally collect because Wildstorm is owned by DC Comics. But yes, he has worked on both. Though, yes, it was back in the mid-90s. None of his bad stuff, per se. Nope. And though his run for Just Like America Volume 2 was actually the last run for that book before it got relaunched as Justice League. Now, some of these other writers, creators are like, okay. Now, one basically be surprised about This next one, this one's quite interesting because he did Avengers first, then he did Justice League. Like, right after he wrapped up Avengers, he went straight over Justice League for a brief period of time. That guy being Kurt Busiek. Yes, the creator of Astro City and the Marvels. Yep. And also the guy who gave John Byrne the idea to create the infamous retcon with Jean Grey. Yep. If I get a chance to meet Kurt Busiek, I'll ask about that. I read about it in a book. Yep. Yeah, he worked on Justice League America, he worked on JLA for a very brief period of time, but he has worked on both. Yeah. As a matter of fact, he later basically his run for Justice League, for JLA, excuse me, later led to his time on Aquaman. Yep. He did JLA from issues 107 to 114. I'm going to get to his run pretty soon. But, yeah, his run will lead to a Aquaman series. But, yeah, Kurt Busiek. But, of course, basically, the first thing he led to while he was working on his run for JLA, he also worked on a series called Power Company. If anybody gets a chance to check out this book, check it out. It is actually really good. And here's a surprise for you about this book. There are no trades for this series. And you're like, if you say it's a good series, why isn't it in trade? I have no idea. As a matter of fact, also I should bring this up here. He and George Perez did the JLA/Avengers crossover, which apparently was according to Rob Liefeld, a title was supposed to have back in the 80s, but Jim Shooter shot it down because he didn't like the premise. Though the original premise I heard was actually a lot more interesting than basically what we got. Now, next one will shock you. The fact that, well, I kind of talked about this guy already because he worked on Avengers. So I talked about his run very recently. But he was known for his DC work than his Marvel work. And that guy being Jeff Johns. Let me list off basically the titles he did for DC. Flash, Green Lantern, JSA, Justice League America, Justice League, Stars and Stripes. He did some Batman work. He did Superman. He did a lot for DC. He still works for DC, though he basically is more like a contractor from nowadays. But he did do a brief time at Marvel for 2 years. Though I have read an article, the reason why he jumped to DC, it paid better. As a matter of fact, here's a strange fun fact for you about Jeff Johns on Avengers. This is the guy who succeeded Kurt Busiek on the book. Before taken up by another writer, I'll talk about as a matter of fact, I'll talk about him next. Chuck Austin. You're thinking, wait, Chuck Austin? Wait a minute. Didn't he do a run for Kenny X-Men? Yes, he did. He also worked on Superman. The reception I heard about that run was not that good. But yeah, Chuck Austin. You're thinking, okay, Chuck Austin did technically work on the last issues of Avengers Volume 3, just before Bendis took over the book. Yeah. But what about his DC time? He did one story arc for DC, for Justice League, and that was JLA 10106. I believe this is the guy I believe he preceded, Kurt Busiek on the title. Yes. Excuse me, okay. This next one is Jerry Ordway. I've actually talked about some issues for JLA, but yeah, he did do an Avengers book. He did 3 issues of, he basically co-wrote issues, Volume 3 Avengers, issues 16 and 18. He was also a longtime penciler for Fantastic Four. I believe this was the issues John Byrne worked on. Yes, John Byrne. Yeah. Great artist. Best book the guy's ever done in his career, in my honest opinion, is The Power of Shazam. An excellent book. Check it out. I really wish DC would basically collect and trade, but that's one of my personal favorites of his. Yes. Of course, he also has issues to go that books are not in trade for some reason. I don't know why. But for DC, I think the most prolific book he worked on was Avengers Superman. Yep. He did a book for about 12 years. Yep. That was like the most high-profile book he worked on. He occasionally worked on books here and there, but that was the book he worked on the longest. Out of everything he worked on for them, that was the book he worked on the longest. Okay. Who else? Ivy Reyes. Really? He has? Yes. He worked on, well, he was the artist on Jeff Johns' Justice League run. He took over from Jim Lee when Jim Lee was not available. And Avengers, he just worked on 2 issues of Jeff Johns' run for that book. 52 and 64, and he did the annual for the final annual for that run, 2001. He also worked in the Vision miniseries, where Jeff Johns wrote that. He also worked on Captain Marvel, Defenders, Quicksilver, Supernaturals. No, not the TV shows, it's a different thing. And a one-shot with Todd Zizinko. Maybe very brief, but yeah. Gary Frank, the guy who succeeded Jeff Johns, who worked on, another artist who worked on Justice League with Jeff Johns. He did work on Avengers for 2 issues, 61 and 62, as an artist. Now, the next 2 are a little bit surprising, given the fact one of them just did it just fairly recently, and these 2 guys being Mark Waid and Brian Michael Bendis. Mark Waid worked on JLA. He did the storyline Tower of Babel. I've talked about that recently. Yeah, he had a run for that book, and he recently joined the basically caveat list of people who worked on both Justice League and the Avengers. He did Avengers in 2015. Actually, it was a really good run. He brought in Alex Ross, a guy who basically worked on Kingdom Come, as the cover artist of the book. Really damn good book. Even when we launched simply as Avengers after first one was all new, all different Avengers, then became Avengers basically after a certain point of time. Bendis, that was fairly recently. He did of course people know him for his very lengthy run of Avengers from about 2005 to about 2012. And his run for Justice League was not well received. I kind of like his run. I haven't finished reviewing it yet, but yeah. This is 100% completely true when it comes to that one. But yeah, but I had to include him because this is 100% completely true. People do know he worked on both. Some of these guys on this list, people not know they worked on both, but they did. Next guy, Adam Kubert, the son of Joe Kubert, who I believe this is the one here who, okay, for his Justice League work, he worked on issue 0 of Justice League America, Volume 2. He did issue 0. He did work on 2 issues of Hickman's run for Avengers. Yeah, he also did AVX and AVX Access. Yep. People know him better for his run on Batman. Well, actually, his brother, basically, Batman. He had a very lengthy run on Wolverine. A run that lasted for 3 years. Of course, he also known for his fantastic cover work. Yep. Made it very much, but I said included. The last one, basically, who I can confirm who did work on both, is Mark Bagley. Oh yeah, also Denny O'Neil worked on. I'll talk about him in just a minute. Mark Bagley. People know him best as the artist behind Ultimate Spider-Man. Yep. He worked on Avengers. He did an annual for them. Yep, he did the annual. And he had a very brief run of Avengers, Justice League. I believe these issues that I'm looking at right here, I think those are the James Robinson issues. Yep. But there is one more. I just recently noticed this one. Now, the other guys, well, David Michelinie is a kind of. He's not one of these kind of ones. He has worked on Avengers. Yes, he has. For Justice League, he just worked on just like Task Force, the opening 3 issues. So that's why I put him in the kind of category, because he did a pretty lengthy run of Avengers. He did a lot of like basically like late 70s, early 80s. Tom DeFalco. He worked on both. He worked on basically Just Like America Volume 3, but not the main book per se, but he did work on Just Like America. He worked on Volume 4 for the book. Yeah, for his Justice League work, yeah, he worked on the Steve Alana book, but not the main book per se. Avengers, he did 2 issues of the book, 170 and 180. It always not count as the kind of category because that was a spin-off book. Roger Stern, he worked on Avengers and JLA Classified. Alan Davis, he did, the only thing Just League worked on was just JLA The Nail. Patrick Churchill, Just League Quarterly. Yeah, like Product, JLA Tomorrow Morning, and I believe he worked on one of the Secret Files books. Muhammad A. Assur, he worked on one of the 80-page Giants, and you probably think, okay, what did he do for Avengers per se? For Avengers, he just did. Let's see. For Avengers, he just did, well, Avengers Initiative. That's why I kind of consider the kind of category for him. Yep. Barry Kitson. He was the guy behind JLA Year 1. And what did he work on for Justice League? Well, that was actually the book he worked on for Avengers. He actually had. He worked on Avengers Assemble. So, a kind of category. So, the last one is Ed McGuinness. Yeah, he worked on JLA Classified. And you can think, okay, what did he work on Avengers? Avengers he worked on, well, he was the artist behind Jason Aaron's run for Avengers. Yep. For JLA Classified, he just did the opening 3 issues. He's more known for his Marvel work than he is for his DC work. Yeah, the only DC that's high profile he worked on was 2 books. Superman Volume 2 and Super Batman with Jeff Loeb. Yep, he worked on both. But those 2 are the high profile books he worked on DC. Marvel, he worked on a lot of Marvel books. As a matter of fact, his most recent work he did with Marvel was actually fairly recently. He worked on issue 3rd. He worked on issues of the Zeb Wells Amazing Spider-Man book. Yep. But those are all your creators for you who worked on both. Some kind of, some actually. Yep. But, yeah. Not much to say about, like, who else basically worked on both. I mean, I couldn't find anybody else. I mean, these are the ones I can find who worked on both, which is some of whom are a bit surprising. Anybody who I list off, did anybody feel surprised that basically, well, I did research on this thing because I found this to be a fascinating topic of work on both Avengers and Justice League. If there's anybody on this list who I named off that you are surprised that worked on both, please list it out in the comments below. Okay? But that's pretty much a particular video. Next up is going to be a comic corner. Okay? Thanks you. Bye.